Kong Jun quit his job as a hunter to work in a management position. No one believed that a B-rank hunter would become a manager, but Kong proved that he was beyond expectations. The story begins in a dungeon in South Africa. The hunters realize at the last minute that the meter was broken. This is because they found a monster with a higher rank than the dungeon. With no other option, they decide to retreat in fear of the worst happening. However, a blonde girl named Maria said she could solve it. She is an S rank, so she feels confident to destroy the lizard. At that moment, the girl pushes the ground so hard that it opens a crater in the place where she was. Maria flies in the air and prepares for a fatal blow, but the one who ends up taking a blow is her. The girl is hit by the lizard's tail and hits a stone wall. The hunters are surprised because an S rank was hit very easily. The bald hunter catches the attention of a guy dressed in black and says it's better to run away. This guy is our protagonist Kong Jun, and he asks the men for a little more time to think. The dust clears and the girl is on the ground. She confesses that she almost turned into a corpse. By a miracle, she is still whole and makes it clear that she will destroy this lizard. At that moment, Maria gets up and punches the monster in the face, but was not able to leave even a scratch. This attempt aroused the lizard's fury even more. Kong observed the situation in silence while the other hunters feared for their lives. The protagonist then takes the weapon and prepares. Suddenly, the bald hunter approaches him and says that there is no way a B rank can beat this lizard, so it is better for everyone to retreat. The protagonist replies that he has no alternative but to try. He believes that only one hit will be enough. At that moment, Kong runs towards the lizard monster and asks Maria to help in the blow. The girl celebrates the hunter's attitude. At that moment, the monster throws some stones that are nearby towards Kong, but he easily dodges them. Maria takes her position on top of the lizard's head. In the next moment, she jumps and attracts all the monsters' attention to herself. This is part of the girl's plan. She kicks the lizard in the chin and then screams for the protagonist. Kong jumps close to the monster's head and in an instant hits its throat with the blade. The attack was successful. A few minutes pass and the group leaves the dungeon after beating the boss. Some men approach and start praising the protagonist, saying that the decapitation is too insane. One of the guys also refers to Kong as Asian and asks if he is by any chance a ninja. The protagonist decided to share the credits with the other hunters and replied that the whole group helped. Maria tried to say something, but Kong didn't pay attention. At that moment, the guy who was praising changes his mood and says that they need to talk about the reward that the group received. As we can see, this guy is a reward thief. He says he will let the group go without any bruises if everyone delivers the items willingly. Obviously, it wasn't something Kong was willing to do, and he asks if the thief thinks he's going to get something just because he has a pistol. The guy gets angry and asks who he thinks he is. At that moment, Kong points a much superior weapon used in demon hunting. Suddenly a shot is heard and red liquid falls everywhere. The scene changes to a few minutes later, when the protagonist and the girl named Maria decide to take the bodies of the thieves to a deserted place. Kong says that he feels easier to end humans than monsters. The girl comments on this life being pathetic, and he says that YRS is even more. At that moment, the protagonist prepares the ether extraction weapon and applies it to one of the demons. Then he goes towards the thieves and starts looting everything the guys stole. The girl comments on this, but Kong replies that there is no way the deceased can use these things. He then changes the subject and asks if Maria liked the increase she had in hiring them. She keeps asking if he is really going to steal the deceased. Kong explains that he can't let that go. After that, the protagonist questions himself if cremation isn't better. He decides he's going to do it and starts burning the corpses. At that moment, Maria looks at him and starts to unbutton her clothes. Then the girl asks what the protagonist intends to do now. He is taken by surprise and ends up thinking that she wants to do inappropriate things, but Maria explains that she is just loosening her clothes to be more comfortable. Kong then asks if she intends to continue cleaning the dungeons here. The girl says she intends to stay until she accumulates enough money to take a vacation and rest, but for now she has almost no money. Maria adds that it would be better if the management increased her money. The protagonist asks if she is talking about management and says that she is entering a management. The girl asks excitedly if he can introduce a good manager to her. Kong takes a deep breath and replies that this is not exactly what he wanted to say. The boy explains that he wants to be a hunter manager because he is already tired of this life. Maria asks, surprised, how a B rank can become a manager. She also calls him crazy. The protagonist replies that this is the typical thought of an S rank. Unlike her, he is only a B rank, and working as a hunter is becoming more and more dangerous. so he intends to stay behind the scenes and make money on those who want to hunt. Kong even invites her to join his agency and promises to make a special price, but the girl quickly refuses and says that he should try to apply this scam to other people. Kong takes a deep breath and says that he is now going back to Korea. He hopes to meet her again one day. Maria smiles warmly and asks Kong to come back if he needs her. The protagonist agrees and says goodbye. The girl follows him with her gaze until he disappears in the desert and tells herself that the problem is that she is not honest either. A few days pass, the scene shifts to Seoul in Korea. A woman starts talking about how it works when she hires a hunter manager. The protagonist listens with a not very pleasant expression. The woman continues to tell Kong that he can leave all the complicated work to the management and focus on his hunter job. The managers will do all the hard work, from in-flight accommodation, sleeping room, gun repairs, and even securing the area to farm ether efficiently. In addition, the management is also responsible for preparing your life for a retirement in the future. All of this is provided with a 7% fee. This woman is Seol Young, representative of the hero managers. After passing on all the information, she asks what the protagonist thinks. The boy soon says that he is not here to hire a service. In fact, he found an ad about a job vacancy for manager and came to apply. Young looks with a disdainful face when he realizes that he only came after a job. She then says that the boy doesn't need to lie and adds that because he can see the hunter device on his arm. Kong gives a smile and says that he stopped being a hunter recently. The woman asks several questions to find out if he is really efficient in working in this area of management. The protagonist answers them all easily and makes it clear that he is willing to be a manager, but Young tries to convince him to go back to being a hunter and says that he can be in charge of his management. Kong smiles, saying that the manager's job is to trick the hunters into joining the management, and he feels that he can do it without problems. Young crosses his arms and challenges him to try to deceive her if he thinks it's that easy. The protagonist just replies that he has already done it. The girl doesn't understand anything and asks what he is talking about. Kong removes the watch and reveals that he tricked her at the moment. He made the girl think that that watch was really from a hunter. Young takes a good look at the item and realizes that the watch is a toy. She starts to think that Kong really doesn't want the job and is probably just watching The Office, while the woman starts to go crazy, creating 1,000 possibilities. The protagonist stays in the background, just drinking his coffee. Suddenly Young slams his hands on the table, calling attention and saying that he didn't fool anyone. In fact, she just forgot to check her hunter license. So the woman offers a new chance for him to try to deceive her. If he succeeds, he will be hired. Kong looks at the girl, trying to contain his laughter, and asks if this is enough to be hired. He then confesses that he has already deceived her for the second time. The manager is taken by surprise and screams, asking what he did this time. Kong pulls something out of his pocket and shows his hunter license, proving that he is indeed a hunter. The woman covers her face with her hands, realizing that she was tricked again because she thought he was not a hunter. Shame is visible on her face, and she says that he can start the job tomorrow. The next day, the two have dinner together. The protagonist asks, curious, where the other employees are. Since there are only them two in the room, the woman confesses, embarrassed, that she has only one more employee, but he is on vacation. Kong complains that this is too little for an average company. Young asks what he means. The protagonist questions if they don't manage any hunters. She reveals that at the moment they are without anyone. The woman even tries to convince Kong to go back to being a hunter for her to start managing him, but the boy reminds her that he had none of that in the contract. He says that he can solve this situation and hunt down some hunters for his company. Young is surprised to hear the word hunt. The protagonist replies that he has always hunted monsters, but now he can use his brain to hunt hunters as well. The scene changes to Sinrim Station, where an alert has just been issued, instructing all train passengers to evacuate calmly and following the safety instructions. A girl smiles, satisfied, when she hears the alert. At that moment, the protagonist arrives at the station and walks towards the square, while holding the map and asking if he is on the right track. At that moment, one of the policemen stops Kong and warns that no one can enter there. The protagonist questions why. The man asks if he did not hear the transmission and tells that a new nucleus has appeared in the square. Kong quickly sees the dungeon forming behind the policeman. At this moment, several people surround the area where the security guards protect the dungeon and say that they are waiting for the hunters. The reporters are also there and wonder if this area is not protected by the Raishan agency. The protagonist hears some comments from the villagers saying that this dungeon is D rank, so probably no amazing hunter will come. Kong thinks about the D-rank core. Suddenly something in the dungeon catches his attention and he notices something. His thoughts are quickly interrupted by some screaming. People celebrate that the Raishan agency has arrived. At that moment the hunters begin to pass by the locals towards the core. The policeman gives permission to start the operation, but is interrupted by Kong asking to wait a bit. The protagonist begins to pass through the security strips while the guard catches his attention. Kong intends not to waste time and soon warns that this dungeon is a trap. She is posing as a D rank, but it is actually a B rank. The policeman looks incredulous when he hears this, but does not take it seriously and tells him not to interfere in the operation. Kong pulls out his hunter license and orders the policeman to retreat all the villagers before they are destroyed by this thing. The man reluctantly accepts. He runs towards the civilians, asking them to flee. At that moment the hunters position themselves below the core. Suddenly the protagonist arrives and scares them all. The red-haired guy yells that this is an area assigned to the Raishan agency. Kong replies that it is not came to get in the way and says that it is just a passing manager. The blonde-haired guy angrily asks what a manager is doing here. The protagonist realizes that all these hunters are C rank. He then warns that the dungeon is a trap. It is actually a B-rank core disguised as D rank. Kong explains that he has seen this happen several times in other countries where he has worked. The blonde-haired commander replies that he has never seen anything about disguised dungeons. He disbelieves everything the protagonist said. Kong changes his tone of voice and questions if he really knows what he is doing. The guy quickly grabs the protagonist by the collar, feeling intimidated, and asks why a manager is meddling in his affairs. Suddenly a loud roar is heard, and the red-haired hunter screams, calling the commander's attention to the dungeon. At that moment some B-rank wolves jump out of the crevasse. The protagonist observes the commander's scared face. The civilians start screaming that everyone is finished because there are no A-rank hunters here. Kong notices the paralyzed commander and tries to calm the situation. Meanwhile the civilians begin to run desperately for their lives. The police call the rescue and demand that the A-rank hunters attend the scene. At that moment all the soldiers shoot towards the monsters, trying to contain the situation until the rescue arrives. The protagonist decides to help and attacks with his sword. The commander of the Raishan guild is shocked to see that Kong was able to defeat a B-rank wolf with just a sword blow. The man is so lost in thought watching the protagonist that he did not notice the monster in front of him. At that moment the wolf attacks towards his face, but Kong was already expecting this to happen, and prevents the attack by jumping on top of the monster's head. The commander is taken by surprise and tries to defend himself with his hands. The next moment Kong uses the sword and splits the wolf in half. Red liquid splashes everywhere and the hunter looks scared. The protagonist explains that it is easy to deal with these monsters when you know the movements they make. After that Kong warns that it is important that they unite to stop these wolves until the hunters rank when they arrive. The commander agrees, but they soon realize that more and more wolves are appearing. The rift doesn't stop spitting monsters, making the first plan almost impossible. The C-rank hunters together with the guards are giving it their all, but it doesn't seem to be working. The captain is soon informed that the heavy equipment has arrived. Without wasting time he asks the C-rank hunters to retreat. The commander seems to be part of this decision, but the police captain warns that the A-rank hunters are already coming. The protagonist asks the commander of the Raishan guild to listen to the orders of the police, but the hunter says that he is against the use of heavy weapons because he will destroy the entire place. The red-haired hunter agrees and adds that they cannot give up the bounty of a B-rank monster. Kong replies that money does not matter now and everyone must retreat before they are hit. It is possible to see the anger on the commander's face, and he refuses to leave. Kong says expressionless and with hatred in his voice that the commander will be responsible if any civilians are injured in that place. The hunter grits his teeth, feeling the pressure of Kang's words, and is ready to retreat. But before that happens, everyone is caught by surprise with an explosion. The protagonist angrily asks why the army used heavy weapons if they couldn't get everyone out. At that moment the thick dust begins to dissipate, and Kong observes a silhouette amidst the rubble. He soon realizes that this explosion was not carried out by the police. A female voice comes out of that dust saying that the real ray of light has arrived to destroy all monsters. The protagonist looks with a silly face as he hears the C-rank hunters praising the girl. They call her by the name of Acacia and say they are her fans. Acacia strikes a pose and calls herself a magical girl. She starts to introduce herself to people, saying that she is here to protect everyone, like a true girl of justice. A silence has hung over all the hunters and soldiers in the place. Kong asks the blonde hunter, confused, if this is the rescue. The guy just replies that this is the girl of justice, and the protagonist still doesn't know who it is. The werewolves are also confused. At this moment the girl, Acacia, prepares to do her job. She casts the flame attack spell, and at the same instant the monsters are torn apart. Kong is shocked to see that the attack caught several werewolves at the same time. The place where the monsters were was totally destroyed. The Raishan Guild congratulates the girl for her enormous power. The protagonist finally realizes that this girl is insane. Acacia looks at the wolves that are left and refers to them as failures. Meanwhile, the portal keeps spitting out various monsters. The girl just laughs at it and says that the rift can continue doing its job, as she is ready to destroy each one of them. Acacia draws her weapon and uses the Court of Justice, which was enough to eliminate several monsters with just one blow. She continued to the sequence of attacks and also used reverse gravity. The protagonist stayed away from the battlefield for a while and decided to ask the commander if this Acacia girl is a returnee from the Ishtar world. This would explain the tremendous power. The blonde hunter asks if this world is not just a legend. Anyway, he does not know where she came from. All he knows is that Acacia is not affiliated with any management. The protagonist watches the girl's steps and constantly hears her calling herself a magical girl. Acacia also offends the monsters of all possible names during the fight. Kong tells himself that this girl is extremely strong. Despite the random attacks and her behavior being a complete mess, it would be a great idea to have her in his agency. While Acacia continues to defeat the monsters and the next attack pierces the wolf fatally, Kong identifies this blow as a well-adjusted spatial twist. This makes the protagonist even more shocked because not everyone can carry out this attack. Now he feels even more anxious to find out who this girl is. A few hours pass and the sunset begins to appear. The portal is gone along with all the monsters. The hunters of the Raishan Guild are relieved. Kong praises everyone, but the commander remembers that they almost did nothing, so he calls the protagonist the manager and thanks him. The commander explains that he doesn't know who he is, but he knows that everything worked out because he found out that the rift was disguised. So he is happy that he is here. At that moment, everyone gathers to receive the reward. After all, they were responsible for containing the demons until the arrival of the upper help. Suddenly Acacia draws everyone's attention. She screams that now that all the forces of evil have been defeated, it's time to leave. The next moment the girl starts running, leaving dust behind. Kong doesn't even have time to understand what happened because the Acacia just disappeared before his eyes. He asks the commander if she really left. The blonde hunter starts laughing and explains that this is normal. Acacia only appears when there is a dangerous situation and then disappears without taking any reward. The man even gets emotional, saying that he always dreamed of seeing her in person. Kong thinks a little about everything he saw today and is happy that this girl acts independently. Suddenly everyone's attention is directed to a voice that apologizes for the delay. The girl who has just arrived warns that there was a communication error, and that's why the rescue team was late. She is happy that everything worked out in the end. The commander tells the girl that everything is fine because the protagonist helped them. The girl gets bright eyes and thanks Kong for helping the Raishan Guild, but questions if he is a hunter. The protagonist breaks his expectations by saying that he is just a hunter manager. It was not what the girl expected to hear, and she looks at him confused, but soon thanks him for helping his team and introduces herself as Do-Ho Yun, an A-rank knight of the Raishan Guild. At this moment the red-haired hunter is sharing some things when suddenly a voice asks what he is doing. The redhead replies that he chose some rewards for the protagonist. A guy dressed in black questions when he was given permission to share the items he received like this. This man looks at the protagonist and asks if his name is Kong. The main character confirms and asks who he is. The man pats Kang's shoulder and asks if the boy has forgotten him, then reminds the protagonist that they work together in the Raishan Guild, but Kong was expelled. Anyway, the guy makes it clear that he is not willing to distribute the reward and warns that this area belongs 100% to Raishan. The rest of the hunters watch carefully in silence as the matter unfolds. Kong looks disgusted at his hand on his shoulder and thinks to himself that he can't remember this guy. Although he heard that they work together, Do-Ho Yun chimes in and scolds his teammate, saying that no matter that this territory is under Raishan's command, they can't deny a reward to a guy who helped their guild. The girl is visibly annoyed. The guy takes off his glasses and tries to convince everyone that he is not being a bad person, but Do-Ho Yun makes it clear that she doesn't believe him. She soon lowers her head as a sign of respect and apologizes to the protagonist for her manager being a rude guy. Kong replies that it's okay and looks at the manager, who, as we can see, the guy is not satisfied at all. The protagonist asks his name and the manager introduces himself as Sukwon, but he gets annoyed that Kong doesn't even remember that. The protagonist replies that he can't remember useless things and says goodbye to everyone, saying that he needs to go now. He leaves the place while the C-rank hunters thank him for his help. Kong walks away and remembers having heard the name of the Doho Yun hunter before, and it would be great to have her on his team, but understands that now he needs to turn his attention to someone more important. Kong looks at the photo he took of Acacia and says that he has found a real talent. Later that night, the protagonist sat in front of his computer and watched a video he found of Acacia. He was more and more convinced that this girl was practically an avatar. Her movements, despite being messy, were very good. In fact, calling her avatar was even close to the power that he could feel. The protagonist tells himself that he is almost sure that this girl is a ticking time bomb. The next day, Kong arrived for another day of work and went to her boss Young, who was playing on the phone. The protagonist interrupted her and asked for a few days to travel for work. The girl doesn't understand why he is asking for this, since they don't have any work to do. Kong opens her arms while stating in a calm voice that she is bringing a very famous hunter to the team. Young seems not to like the idea because he believes that this famous hunter already has another management, so she doesn't want a problem with any other company. The protagonist quickly reassures the boss by saying that this hunter is independent. He then asks if Young knows the magical girl named Acacia. The boss reveals that she has heard this name a lot, and it seems that this hunter is quite famous. That's why she is a little skeptical if the protagonist will be able to bring someone like that to the team. After all, the largest agency in the country tried to recruit her and failed. Kong crosses his arms and reminds Young that he has been a hunter before, so he will have no problem with that. Finally, he asks her to trust him and let him make this trip. A little later, the protagonist arrived at a train station and remained firm in the idea of finding Acacia. He had already seen several videos of people who managed to record the appearance of the girl. It was thanks to the posts that Kong got an important clue to Acacia's location. She often appears after 5:30 p.m. near the train station. The problem is that the protagonist is sure that that girl can change her appearance. This makes it increasingly difficult for her to be found. Even with so many issues, Kong believes that she is not a child. After all, Acacia always appears after 5:30, a time when children would normally be with their parents at home. Following this line of reasoning, it is likely that she is an adult and works in an office, being able to move freely after work. The protagonist at this moment carefully observes the surroundings of the station and notices some advertisements with the girl's image. It seems that companies are using Acacia's fame to promote their products. A few minutes later, we see Kong traveling on a train with the aim of finding Acacia. He still has the idea of the avatar in mind and believes that the girl can change her appearance to anything from people to animals. As Acacia screams all the time that she is a magical girl, her appearance consequently changes to a more childish image. The protagonist deduces that the girl's identity changes according to the things she likes. After so much research, it is possible to see that the girl's transformation is always for an idol or a female character. This makes Kong believe that Acacia is nothing more than an otaku. The protagonist is even scared by his own thoughts, especially with the possibility that Acacia is not even a woman. He prefers not to think about it that way because it may just be someone who likes magical girl anime and had his own appearance affected. Anyway, the protagonist hopes that Acacia is a woman. While Kong was lost in his thoughts, the train issued a new alert about an E-rank core that was discovered near the station. People were told to leave the train at the next stop. The protagonist thinks about this information for a while and thinks that Acacia can go to the location, but it is likely that the distance is a bit complicated and it will take a while for her to arrive. Even so, Kong still believes that the girl will succeed if she is an avatar with running ability. At that moment, the train stops and people start to leave the station. The protagonist comes to the conclusion that he will be able to find Acacia in only one place. He then looks ahead, where there is a big poster advertising a movie about Acacia. This is the only valid clue that Kong has to find his hunter. In addition, he believes that by the girl's personality, she will not miss the opportunity to see a movie about herself. The protagonist even feels like a genius for reaching this conclusion. The scene changes to the entrance of the cinema. Some people are already buying their buckets of popcorn. An apparently tired blonde-haired girl chooses one of the tables, when suddenly she hears a voice saying that she managed to arrive on time after a long day at work. This person is the protagonist, and he sat at the girl's table as if they were old acquaintances. She obviously didn't understand anything and looked at Kong confused. The protagonist just stared back at her. The girl, trying to look friendly, gave a forced smile, but questioned herself what this guy is doing. She decides to ask him if there's anything wrong. Kong displays a seductive look and smiles, saying that she finally found the magical girl. The girl is surprised by these words and asks if Kong is referring to her as a magical girl. The protagonist gives a thumbs up with his hand. He really saw a resemblance between this girl and Acacia. But the girl starts to sweat cold, thinking that she is talking to a madman. Kong tries to start a conversation saying that the huntress is very famous, and that's why they are making a movie of hers. The girl at the table tries to ignore it to see if the guy leaves, but the protagonist goes on to say that Acacia has been very active in the last few days, defeating some monsters. After these, in the words, the girl finally understands that when the protagonist called her a magical girl, it was because he was referring to her as Acacia. At that moment, she begins to deny that she has any relationship with that hunter, but the protagonist just gets a silly face, thinking that she is trying to deceive him. The girl even starts to sweat cold, but for the protagonist it is of no use. He is sure that this girl meets all the conditions of the huntress and looks a little physically like Acacia. The protagonist finds all this very interesting and is now focused on finding out if they are the same person. He then starts calling her by the name of Acacia. The girl just thinks that today is not her lucky day and she unfortunately found a crazy guy. Suddenly she is taken by surprise when Kong asks if this outfit is plagiarized. People comment all the time on the internet about her outfits during the fight. Kong knows that this would make the girl angry and starts to tease even more by asking if she doesn't think these comments are disrespectful to Acacia. The blonde girl is about to explode in anger. She can't contain herself and gets up from the table, screaming that the protagonist is the only disrespectful one here. This action scares everyone in the place, and they look trying to understand what happened. The girl realizes that she got a lot of attention and quickly sits down. She lowers her voice and tells the protagonist that the outfit was not plagiarized. The girl is determined to show that nothing has been plagiarized, so she takes a pen and starts drawing fiercely in her notebook, then shows Kong the difference between the clothes he says are plagiarized from an anime character. Then the girl takes a deep breath and says she hates these fans who make these comparisons. Kong just laughs and apologizes, but soon asks how she knows so much Acacia. This question leaves the girl paralyzed. She starts to make excuses, saying that she is just a fan. The protagonist found the opportunity he wanted and told the girl that they could talk about the huntress, but the two are interrupted by an alert that echoed on the spot about a D-rank portal that was detected near Darim Station. That's why it's important for civilians to leave the current station to avoid further damage. Kong realizes that it's an emergency transmission and assumes that the hunters are late. The girl despairs when she hears this and asks how he came to this conclusion. The protagonist replies that there is a very big dispute between the agencies for this station. Probably the delay is because of this conflict. The girl starts her cold and then says that she needs to go because a last-minute job came up. But Kong holds her by the arm, saying that the station is very dangerous and she can't go out there like that. She tries to argue and the protagonist says that they should wait for the hunters, unless she is really the Acacia to defend everyone. The girl sees no other alternative and says out loud that it seems that all the civilians managed to escape. At that moment she stomps her foot on the ground and a yellow light exudes from her body. The next moment Acacia makes her entrance, jumping over the girl. Kong is surprised by the free show. The blonde girl says that the protagonist has already figured out what he wanted. She really is responsible for summoning Acacia, so she asks him to get out of the way because someone has to go to the station. Kong replies that Acacia doesn't need to go and shows her phone, where she has a recorder with a false alert. He laughs, saying that it's just an old emergency recording. Nothing is happening at the station right now. Acacia's summoning looks silly, while the girl gets annoyed that she was tricked. Kong puts away his cell phone and tells Acacia that she is even more beautiful in person. The girl angrily asks who he is. Kong bows and hands over a paper. He apologizes for not introducing himself earlier and says that he is a former hunter, currently works as a manager. The summoner of Acacia takes the paper in his hand and is shocked to find out that Kong is a manager. He says he lied because he had no other option. The summoner questions if he intends to make his identity public now that he has found out the truth. Kong awkwardly replies that it's better to talk about it later. The girl can't hide his irritation. The protagonist shows the movie ticket and asks if she wasn't looking forward to it, so he invites her to watch the movie together. The summoner didn't expect it and ends up agreeing. A few minutes later the two choose the places next to each other. The movie starts and the girl can't concentrate. She keeps remembering that she was tricked. In addition, she feels at a disadvantage because all she knows about Kong is that he is a former hunter and now works as a manager, so she fears that he knows much more about her life than her true identity. A few hours later the movie finally ends and people start to leave the session. The protagonist gets up and comments that the movie is much better than he thought. Now he understands that he can't look down on children. At that moment the summoner starts to pull him by the clothes. Kong looks at her and realizes that the girl is red. The summoner looks away in embarrassment and says that there is a coffee shop nearby that they could go to. The scene changes to a coffee shop, where we see the girl screaming that that movie was better than expected. She had a lot of fun and comments with the protagonist the best scenes. Kong asks if she likes this type of animated movie with 3D technology. The summoner replies that she has been a fan since elementary school. She quickly realizes that she is very excited and is embarrassed, so she decides to change the subject and asks the protagonist what he meant before. Kong decides to get straight to the point, but is fed up with calling her Acacia and decides to ask her real name. She replies that it is Gina Choy. The protagonist then calls her by her real name and asks since when she started using her avatar. Gina is confused and asks what an avatar is. The protagonist replies that avatar refers to the ability to summon a spirit, which in this case is Acacia. Gina takes a deep breath and reveals that it has been about 2 to 3 years since she managed to summon Acacia. Specifically, Kong asks confused if she has ever summoned anything before. The girl replies that before it was like summoning only souls, but in these last few years she was able to summon Acacia. She questions the reason for these questions. Kong decides to be more direct and apologizes for it, but reveals that Gina will have at most 5 more years to live. This news catches the girl off guard. She starts to tremble as she asks what he is talking about. Sometime later Gina takes the train back home and starts to reminisce about the conversation she had with the protagonist. She asked if it wasn't good to be strong. Kong agreed that it's very good to be strong, but Acacia's skills are above S-class, so basically it's like Gina driving a car without brakes. At this rate she will be a maximum of 5 years old. Acacia's power is very strong and will cause her body to be destroyed. These words were marked in Gina's head. At that moment she begins to tremble and tells herself that it is not good to find out how long she can live, but this explains her bad feeling in the last days. Suddenly her thoughts are interrupted by an alert that echoes inside the train. The civilians are warned about a D-rank portal that appeared at the Yulgiro station, so it is important that they avoid the place. Gina feels that it is better not to use Acacia on this occasion, especially after the news she received. Her mind goes into conflict and she wonders if she should really do this. A few minutes later Gina arrives near the Yulgiro station, along with some curious people. She did not hold back and ended up going, but fortunately help has already arrived. At that moment some hunters who are in the place talk to each other about Acacia. The first one with black hair says that it would be good if she came because he would like to see her. The other with brown hair confesses that he would only like Acacia to come because she never takes anything. The first hunter scolds the other for the size of greed, but the guy replies that he values the reward. Gina ends up listening to the conversation and is sad. She starts crying and runs to leave the place. Deep down Gina knew that some hunters thought that of her, but it still hurt to hear that. She stops running for a moment while tears roll down her face. The girl then starts screaming out loud that she knows people are like that, but she wanted to protect everyone. She ends up drawing the attention of passers-by with her crying. Suddenly the girl feels something hurt in her chest while crying. The next moment she starts spitting violently. That night Ginny came across a red liquid dripping from her mouth. She wonders what she should do now, and the image of the protagonist automatically comes to her mind, where he said he could help her. The next day Kong is woken up with a call from Gina. He answers worried that something may have happened. Gina is sitting on a park bench and immediately asks if they can meet today. The protagonist agrees and asks for the location. The girl passes the place and he types something on his computer, then says that he is going to her. Kong is pleased that he thought that Gina would take longer to look for him. Night quickly arrives and the summoner is still on the same bench, visibly sad. The protagonist arrives at the place and offers a drink. He apologizes saying that he could only find this for her. Gina accepts the drink and replies that everything is fine. The protagonist sits next to her and asks why he was called. The girl stutters saying that it is about Acacia. it seems that she is no longer needed. Kong asks why Gina thinks that. The girl replies that she thinks her summoning is no longer necessary because portals can be destroyed even without Acacia. Kong replies that everyone likes her summoning. Gina says that they only like it because she does not accept a reward. The girl is sure that she would be expelled if she demanded any remuneration. In addition, she is not even a real hunter. She is nothing more than an unwanted guest. During these years, she just wanted to help everyone with her skill. But now she no longer feels happy. In addition, she has little time left to live. So it is better to give up. The protagonist replies that in fact Acacia is not a hunter, but she is not an unwanted guest either. She is just a magical girl. These words make Gina feel welcomed. Kong smiles, saying that she is a hero for wanting to help others without reward. This is much better than being a hunter. She has saved many lives in recent years without wanting anything in return. So she believes that Acacia is very important. Gina is moved by these words, and finally a smile appears on her face. She confesses that she feels better in Kang's presence and her words are good. However, giving up is still the best option for someone who will live a maximum of 5 years. The protagonist quickly interrupts her and says he can help with that. Ginny looks surprised. He then repeats that he can help her live longer, then asks if Gina has ever heard about the ether. The girl vaguely remembers this word and asks if it is what the hunters extract from the portals the protagonist holds the drink while explaining that the ether is the main resource. Hunters absorb it directly to strengthen their abilities and body. This means that ether is basically a battery for humans. He asks if Gina has ever absorbed something like this. She replies that she has never heard anything like this before, but assumes that the lack of ether is the cause of her life having decreased. Kong looks at her in silence and suddenly stands up, catching the girl's attention, then begins to shout happily that her life can increase with the help of the ether. Gina questions if her life force can be returned. Kong replies yes while being pressed. Gina begins to cry emotionally and confesses that she thought she would have no way out. The protagonist assures that she does. But first you have to be honest. At that moment Kong raises his hand to the girl and says she wants her. Our seductive protagonist was thinking about business when she said that, but Gina thought she was being asked on a date. She blushes extremely with embarrassment and asks what he means. Kong reminds her of the conversation they had about her abilities being S-class. The power itself is very good, but they need to work better on it. While talking, the protagonist realizes that the girl is not paying attention to his words. In fact, Gina was just scolding herself for thinking about a date when the protagonist only wanted to talk about skills. At that moment, Kong raises his hand again and invites her to be a hunter. From his agency, Gina watches the protagonist say that he is sure he can help her with the skills, especially with his avatar. He smiles, asking her to trust his work. The summoner is silent for a moment, but soon touches her hand and accepts to be his hunter. After that, she excitedly asks what they are going to do now. Kong thinks quickly and says that he intends to make a report. This was not quite what Gina expected to hear. She asks with fear if she will have to reveal about Acacia and even imagines the headlines that will come out, but the protagonist reassures her that he will register her as a normal awakening and will hide the detail about Acacia. Gina finally takes a deep breath and then remembers that she knows nothing about Kong. She feels that he is also a suspicious person. Anyway, Gina thanks her. Secret is kept. Kong replies that it is okay because now they are a team. From now on he will protect his identity as a good manager. The girl feels a chill run down her spine and gives a relieved smile, thanking in advance for everything he will do. The next day, Gina goes to the company where the protagonist works. Her avatar starts to introduce itself and she watches everything embarrassed. Kong laughs while her boss seems surprised by Acacia. Gina says that's enough and sends her avatar into space. Young applauds the girl for her talent and confesses that she thought Kong was trying to fool her again. That's because he had never heard of Avatar before. The protagonist listens incredulously to his boss confess that she distrusted him. Gina finds the discussion of the two funny. At that moment, Young delivers a contract while saying that she finally confirmed her identity as Acacia, so she will have no problem signing the form. Gina accepts the contract and watches Young and Kang's celebration from afar. She gets jealous and tells herself that she didn't expect the company's CEO to be a woman. A few hours later, the work comes to an end. Young tirefully says that he finally managed to organize all of Gina's documents. The protagonist congratulated her on the effort. The boss is excited because now they have a hunter and the company will finally be able to work. Kong replies that maybe it won't be that fast. The woman doesn't understand what he means. The protagonist replies that Ginny's lifespan is almost depleted with the use of her avatar's ability. This means that Acacia will not be able to fight for now. Young asks if it is not enough to offer ether to Gina. Kong says that this is exactly the problem and asks how much ether she thinks she will need. Young gets thoughtful and can't come to a conclusion, then asks how much is needed. Kong replies that probably about 50 billion. Young shouts, asking if he is talking about the $50 billion. The protagonist says that even if they get that amount, the ether cannot be absorbed at once, so you need to train Gina first. In this case, the Acacia will not even be summoned since the summoner's body is what needs to be trained. Young sits in the chair feeling defeated, but decides that she will not stay like this for long. She then questions if the protagonist created expectations in Gina even though he knew it would be difficult. The boy replies yes. Young says that he did it right, since it is the task of the management to take care of all the preparations. So from today the two together they will help Gina with their enormous power. Kong smiles in agreement. Young says he will take care of the next preparations. The next day arrives. Kong and Gina are waiting for the boss. At that moment Young appears with an extremely heavy bag. The two look together at what the boss brought. Young tells Gina that all these things are equipment. She got everything from an acquaintance from the High-and-Wall workshop, a manufacturer of equipment for luxury hunters. Most of the weapons were used a few times. Gina takes a look at the objects while Young brags about his personal connections. The protagonist takes one of the weapons and realizes the absurd quality of the item. He didn't expect the equipment to be so good because it was delivered for free. In this place most of the equipment costs approximately 20 million won. Kong finds all this very suspicious and tells the boss that he is going to do some tests with the weapons. He then takes a laser item and moves away from the girls. The distance is enough and the protagonist begins to test the object. He moves his hands simultaneously without stopping. Gina praises his movements and Young says that the protagonist was a hunter before he was a manager. Suddenly Kong feels the object shake and sees that he doesn't have much time. Without thinking twice the boy jumps in the air and throws the equipment away, then presses his hunter watch and yells at the girls to duck. An explosion echoes, but the protagonist manages to create a protective barrier in time. The girls hug each other terrified by what just happened. Young asks what happened. Kong replies that it is better for her to check her personal connections, that product was defective and the ether output was not properly controlled. It is possible that the other items are also defective. The protagonist states that he does not believe that this is happening in the High-and-Wall workshop. Young says that it could hurt innocent people if used on a battlefield. Kong immediately agrees. After the incident, the protagonist went to the High-and-Wall workshop to clarify what was wrong with the item. He comes across a man and deduces that it must be the manager of the place. From the man's face it is possible to see that he is not willing to solve any problem. The protagonist says that he could have been injured, but the manager belittles his concern saying it was a free item. Kong loses his temper and punches the table saying that this is no laughing matter. After all, High-and-Wall workshop products are famous for their hunter equipment. The manager asks what he means by that. Kong questions if the failure was unintentional. The man laughs at the question and says that the protagonist is delusional. He probably spent a lot of time watching movies and now he went around accusing others. Kong gets even more annoyed when he realizes that the man is trying to deceive him. At this point the manager seriously asks him if the protagonist knows black consumers, but Kong has never heard about it before. The man soon explains that black consumers are those who file malicious complaints to obtain lucrative advantages, especially when it comes to receiving a free item. The man claims that the protagonist is pretending that the High-and-Wall workshop gave a failed equipment to try to extort money from them. Kong already imagined that the man would come up with an excuse. The manager says he's going to give advice. He lights a cigarette and warns that next time it's better to meet his opponent first, then confesses that he received a request from Seol Young to take care of CEO Young. That's why he made this trap. He just didn't expect the minion to have so much courage to face him. The man approaches the other protagonist and continues to talk about how their workshop is superior, and as they are well placed in the hunter industry. The protagonist gets tired of this conversation and uses his laser gun to cut the cigarette. The man looks incredulous when he realizes that he could have been hit. He even threatens to call the police. The protagonist makes it clear that he is not here to hurt anyone. In fact, he only came to return the item he received from workshop. The laser gun is left on the table. The manager starts stuttering and the protagonist sits comfortably on the couch. Kong reminds the manager that he was accused of lying about the failure of the gun and wanting to make money from the workshop, so they can sit and wait for equipment not to explode. It seems that the man fears for his life. The protagonist clarifies that the object should work perfectly without any risk. The manager goes into despair and tries to hold the weapon. Kong is faster and holds the object. He then questions if the manager had not said that this equipment did not present a risk of explosion. The protagonist says that he can let all this go if they reach a consensus. The man starts to sweat cold and comes to the conclusion that Kong is crazy, but he is sure that the boy would not cause an explosion with the two inside the room, so he begins to deny that the workshop intentionally damaged the equipment. The protagonist returns to the couch and says that it is impossible for the company to have nothing to do with it, since he received the object from their workshop. The manager finds no other way out but to confess the truth, so he reveals that he won a large sum of money from a hooded man to deliver this item. He obeyed, but was not able to see the man's face. The protagonist thinks a little about this information. The manager summarizes what happened and says that the Hyanwall workshop delivered unchecked items received from an unknown person. Kong kicks the table with all his strength and asks how a serious workshop can make such a mistake. He confesses that he already thought it was suspicious before, but after this explanation it is impossible not to realize that there is something wrong. The manager throws himself on the ground, trying to protect himself from the protagonist's fury. He begs for forgiveness and promises to give another item completely without fail. Kong says that this promise does not guarantee anything. The man then says that he can do whatever he wants if the protagonist turns off this laser equipment. Kong replies that he will do it if the manager agrees to sign a contract. The man yells that he will give unlimited warranty on his products if he hangs up. That's it. The protagonist finally gets what he wants and presses the off button on the item. The manager notices that he could have hung up himself. Kong lowers his head towards the man and says he's happy for the deal. The guy starts cursing, realizing he's been tricked. The protagonist says that he doesn't have much to worry about and reveals that he recorded the entire conversation they had. The manager starts to sweat cold. Kong clicks on the recording where the manager's voice appears confessing that he sold himself for a large amount of money. The manager knows that if this recording is released, will completely ruin the name of the company. The protagonist begins to leave the room and says that he is happy with the deal. On the other hand, he feels that his vital energy has been sucked. Before going, Kong looks back and says that he will send a copy of the contract. The man looks angry and asks who he is after all. Kong laughs and replies that he is just a hunter manager, with a specialty in hunting. The protagonist leaves the building and calls Yong, warning that a contract will arrive at the company later. He also laughs, saying that the laser sword was very useful. Yong asks what the conversation was about. Kong replies that apparently there is someone behind sending the failed items. This person intended to assassinate them with the explosion. Anyway, he took care of everything. The two then have a quick conversation. The boss talks about the protagonist getting everything he wants. He thanks the compliment. A little later, Kong asks permission to enter the office. Yong soon sees the pile of boxes that he brought and asks if these are the items that the Hyanwall workshop gave. Kong crosses his arms, saying that now they just need to check if everything is okay. The items are placed on the floor separately. This time the protagonist realizes that all the objects are new. In addition, some of the equipment is Class A, with absurd quality. Yong was exhausted from moving so many items. She confesses that she didn't expect to win so much this time, while the protagonist is more curious to open each box. The girl says that she will leave it with him. Yong confesses that she is happy because now she has enough equipment to train a hunter. She begins to imagine a team of 3 men fully equipped. It would be great for their company. The protagonist just asks the girl to wake up from the dream. He reminds her that it is getting late and it is time for the students to leave the night temple. Yong asks what a night temple is. Kong answers in a place where there are some hunters who fight for the sense of justice. The girl finds this story tiring. Besides, their company is small and the hunters will prefer to choose any other. Kong asks if it is really difficult and Yong replies that he thinks it will not work. The protagonist smiles, saying that if this is the case, he will need help. The next day in the temple, some students are still in class. A black-haired girl watches her classmates talk, but the subject is not so captivating and she turns her face to the other side. Suddenly someone asks if she is waiting for someone. The girl turns her face and notices that pink-haired girl looking at her. A silence falls over the two because the black-haired girl decides not to answer. The pink-haired one insists on talking and asks why her colleague is so quiet. She sits at the same table and starts bragging, saying that she is tired of dealing with so many agencies in the last few days. It seems that some companies are overloaded with the competition of Knights of the Temple. The pink-haired girl adds that it would be better if they changed some rules. The black-haired one questions if she is not applying for all the vacancies that appears. The girl replies that she is not talking about it exactly. She just doesn't like the fact that she can't do anything in the temple. Using weapons and even dating is forbidden. That's why she's not sure how long she can endure these orders. The girl with black hair replies that she doesn't care about these rules. It's not a big question for her because after graduating she can do whatever she wants. The girl with pink hair replies that she's not even that strong, so she questions why her classmate doesn't do what she wants in this temple. The one with black hair is silent for a moment and then replies that she finds everything boring. The girl with pink hair decides to end the conversation and says that she thought the girl could understand her, but she was wrong. She then says goodbye and says that maybe they will see each other in the future. It turns out that Templar hunters usually never meet again after graduating. After that, the black-haired girl is left alone in the room. She mentally says that she may not be able to find her classmate again, but hopes that the pink-haired one will find the right person if she continues on this path of hunting. The scene changes to the protagonist and his boss on top of the building, watching a helicopter. Young desperately asks what's going on. Kong says that apparently his friend came earlier than he thought. The man in the helicopter warns that they are at the point. The protagonist's old friend starts laughing and says that the trip was relaxing. After that, Maria removes the noise blocker and jumps out of the helicopter. The blonde lands in style. Young asks if Kong is sure this woman is a friend. Maria walks up to them and asks why Kong decided to call in the middle of his vacation. Young finally realizes who the woman in front of him is and screams, shocked that this is the S-rank hunter, the famous Maria. Young says that someone so amazing couldn't be friends with Kong. Maria joins the conversation and asks if Young is the protagonist's boss. She raises her hand saying that she's heard a lot about the CEO. Young quickly greets Maria and says it's an honor to meet her. After that, the boss even posted a photo with the hunter on her social networks. Maria decides to ask the protagonist why he called. Kong asks if the girl didn't read the message. She confesses that she came to meet him as soon as she saw the message asking her to come, so she didn't read the rest. Kong screams saying that the girl should have read everything. He decides to make a brief summary and says that the graduation season at the Night Temple is approaching, so he would like her to help him with this. Maria understands the goal and asks if he is trying to hire someone using her name. The protagonist confesses that he still does not feel safe to use his own name, but using the name Paladin Maria would give her an advantage. After all, she is the strongest hunter recognized by the world. The girl blushes hearing this and asks what she should do. Kong smiles, saying that she only needs one thing. Maria reluctantly questions what it is. A few hours later, the three get into a car and Kong drives on the highway. He says he is happy to have a moving van to bring the hunters. In the back seat, it is possible to see that the boss is still embarrassed to talk openly with Maria. The hunter tries to start a conversation and asks Young how the protagonist has been doing. The boss starts to stutter and the protagonist helps by saying that everything was fine. Young yells at Maria that the truth is that she feels anxious when talking to a great hunter, so she hasn't been able to give any words so far, but she needs to confess that the protagonist did very well. Maria replies that she believes. After all, Kong is a B-rank hunter. This information surprises Young and she asks if B-rank are not those super strong. Maria replies no. The highest rank is S, the lowest is C. B-rank is given to an average hunter. Young is shocked. Maria explains that the protagonist could reach a rank or S rank if he hadn't given up. Young finally understands the classification and then asks how long they have been friends. Kong replies that since they were very young. In adolescence, he entered the Hunter's Academy and Maria entered the Knight's Temple, but even so they continued to keep in touch. Maria confesses that her grades were very similar to those of the protagonist. Kong scolds her for passing the conversation in front of her and says that she hadn't even reached that part yet. Young is surprised and asks why the girl was so bad in class. The protagonist gets angry when he realizes that his boss deduced that the grades were bad. Maria replies that her grades were not the highest because she fought a lot with the teachers. The truth is that Maria started fighting with the teachers from the moment she was called by her real name. Young is surprised by this and asks if Maria is not her real name. The protagonist enters the conversation and says that despite the blonde hair and blue eyes, Maria is not American. In fact, she is Korean and her real name is Yul Soon Kim. At that moment, Maria starts yelling at the protagonist, asking why he is revealing his secret. Kong replies that it was she who wanted to bring up the past. The girl is sad with tears in her eyes. She begins to insult the protagonist and say that she will end their lives together. Young fears for his own safety at this moment. A few minutes later, the group arrives at the Night Temple and receives a list with names of students. Some are even described as geniuses. Young asks if it is a regular list. Kong replies that it has not yet been officially posted, but anyway, there are no students who want to be Templars on the list of students of the temple. The protagonist confesses that he even thought about buying them with money. The boss asks if this is not illegal. Kong gives a scary smile and Young says that he is. Looking like a villain, Maria says that her friend is like this normally. The protagonist decides to focus on what they came to do and says that the first place on the list is a student named Kong Juyun, but she doesn't want to be a hunter. The second on the list is Seo Erin, that black-haired girl we saw at the beginning. Her scores are all high and for some reason she doesn't like to cooperate very much. Maria comments that she is very beautiful and Young questions why her cooperation score is so low. Kong replies that it is because she does everything by herself without asking for help. He looks at Mary and asks if she is ready. The hunter nods and removes Erin's photo from the album. When looking closer, she comments that this girl has a different look. Kong agrees and says that she had already noticed this. The boss tries to follow the internal conversation between friends. Maria observes the photo a little more and says that this was the look that the protagonist used to have. Young joins the conversation and says that it would also be good to have that student from the first place on the list. The hunter disagrees, saying that she doesn't believe she can change Kong Juyun's thoughts because she must have already made the decision not to be a hunter, so there is nothing they can do. The protagonist says that for now they should focus only on Erin. In the middle of the conversation, Kong ends up having a strange feeling, but decides to let it go and invite the girls to get to know this student named Erin better. He gets up from the table and signals with his hand for the girls to follow. The girls talk about the protagonist's enthusiasm. The scene changes to a classroom inside the temple. Erin is sitting in silence. Meanwhile, the protagonist walks around the courtyard trying to find the best way to convince her to accept his request. He was sure he could bring Erin, but now he doesn't know how he will convince her of it. Kong is a little lost in his thoughts when suddenly something catches his attention. That pink-haired girl walks past him and anger is visible on his face. The protagonist quickly recognizes Kong Juyun, who was at the top of the list. He looks at her and realizes that the girl looks like an ordinary college student, despite being the smartest in the temple. The protagonist prefers not to draw her attention for now because he knows that the girl has no desire to be a hunter, but he hopes that in the future he can meet her again. At that moment, Kong feels a strange presence behind, and when he turns around he finds Erin looking at him. The protagonist signs with his hand while the girl seems horrified by his presence. Without thinking twice, he invades the room and asks for a minute to talk to her. The girl already imagines the reason for the conversation and allows it. Kong soon tells that she saw her Templar candidate formulary. The girl answers vaguely. A silence falls over the two and they just stare at each other for a few seconds. Kong decides not to waste time and sits at the same table, then asks if she has any plans to become a hunter in the future. Erin asks if he researched about her. The protagonist replies that he knows that the girl wants to become a Templar, but before finishing the sentence, he is interrupted and Erin replies that he accepts. Kong is surprised because he did not expect it to be so easy. Erin puts her hair behind her ear and replies with shame that if he chose her, then she feels prepared to do this. The protagonist finds it suspicious and looks confused at her rapid mood swing. The girl just directs her gaze the other way, but can't help but smile. Meanwhile, in the temple courtyard, the girls are still together waiting for the protagonist. Maria watches the boss tremble in her presence. Young tries to hold a conversation and the huntress asks how old she is. The boss is surprised to realize that the huntress is talking to her. Maria repeats the question again while seeing the woman's animation. Young feels that the atmosphere is different since the protagonist left. She thinks about what to say and the hunter soon warns that it is not good to lie to her because no one can deceive her. So the boss prefers to answer that she is many years old. Maria laughs, saying that she looks younger. Then the hunter gets serious and starts to tell Young that at first she thought she was just a student, but her sharp eye can see that Young feels lost. So he guides her to look for a hospital. The boss just lowers her head and says that she understands the concern, but at the moment she wants to focus only on her work. Suddenly a sound of footstep is heard behind them. The protagonist appears totally in a good mood and says that brought the coffee that they ordered. Young is curious to know how he did with the student Aaron. Kong replies that surprisingly the girl accepted to be a hunter very easily. Young is shocked by this news and Maria says that this is not good. The protagonist shows that the hunter contract has already been signed by Aaron. The boss takes the leaf out of Kang's hand and can't stop asking how he managed to convince the girl to sign a contract on the same day they met. The protagonist replies that he ended up meeting Aaron by accident and suggested that she become a hunter. The young woman accepted without problems, so he assumes that she just gave up being a Templar. Maria quickly comes to the conclusion that Aaron fell in love with Kong. The boss says that all this was very sudden. Maria gets up from the table and says that now her work is done. Kong smiles and thanks her friend for attending, since her presence makes things easier. The girl agrees and says that he should not forget to pay her later. She then says goodbye to the two, and Young asks shocked if the huntress is already leaving. She is sad because they had little time. Maria replies that it is no problem and calls the protagonist for a private conversation. After that the two walk together and the huntress asks her friend to try to think before acting, or everyone will be in trouble. Kong replies that he will contact her later. The huntress just repeats for him to be careful. After that she approaches the car and says that they will see each other soon. Kong asks the girl to be careful on the trip. A warm smile comes out of Maria's face. After that she leaves. The protagonist's phone rings and he warns Young that Maria is gone. The boss says that the last documents and interview with Gina are completed. Later that night, Aaron lies in his dark room. As he slowly runs his hand over the screen of his cell phone, the post that appears on the screen is about an interview with the survivors of the monstrous Jetchen underpass disaster. The Jetchen underpass disaster happened in 2031. It was one of the disasters with the highest number of victims in recent times. It all started because of a G-class dungeon that was abandoned. The wavelength detector couldn't detect anything wrong and everyone was caught off guard with monsters coming out of the ground. Little Erin was one of the survivors of the disaster. She saw everything happen before her eyes when she came home from school. The monsters kept multiplying and evolving, leading to the end of thousands of residents. Erin was trying to survive in the midst of the chaos along with the other classmates. She wanted to go home and get her parents, but her friends stopped her because it was too dangerous and dragged her away. Erin was forced to retreat. After that, all the students took cover in the underground bunker of Jetchen High School. Erin just sat quietly while the principal talked to the students and residents. Some civilians simply wanted to open the door of the bunker to try to save someone who was outside, but other people were against it because they ran the risk of some monster finding the hiding place. At that moment Erin walked to the door of the bunker. The director shouted that she should not open it, but she did not listen to his requests and opened the door, then looked at the girl who was crying on the other side and told her to come in. The principal was shocked to see that it was the student Ju-hee, the man who did not want to open the door, reassured the student, saying that everything was fine and she was safe. Erin was angry when he saw the falsehood on that principal's face. The student joined the other survivors and the principal caught Erin's attention, saying that she should close the door before something bad happened. At that moment Erin insulted the disgusting garbage director and turned his back. She simply left the bunker and closed the door. Now Erin was back on the streets again with all that chaos happening. She was sure that her parents were not alive and decided that she had no reason to stay in this land alone. The girl was willing not to fight. At that moment a monster appeared ready to devour her, but was stopped by a hunter who used the laser sword to destroy the demon. Erin looked at the hunter with admiration. The man passed on to his superiors that he had found a child in the 15-year-old lost range. The person on the other end of the line asked the hunter to bring the child to safety. Erin sat on the ground with her eyes fixed on that man. She could never forget his face. At that moment the hunter approached and asked her to make an oath pact with her finger. This caught Erin totally off guard. He asked her to swear that she would obey him until he managed to get her out of here safely. The two were observed by a demon from above while talking, who without thinking twice jumped to make more victims. However, in a matter of seconds the hunter took out his pistol and hit the demon. After that he asked again for Aaron to promise. The girl quickly took the oath and the two left there holding hands. The demons continued to appear and were all hit by the hunter's weapon, who had no effort to destroy those things. The day was getting dark and more demons began to fall. The sunset was already appearing when Aaron decided to ask the name of his savior. He preferred to hide his true identity and said that he was someone who hunted demons, a hunter. The scene returns to the present and we see Aaron still lying in her room. The girl was sure that the hunter who saved her life was the protagonist, but she was upset that he didn't recognize her. Aaron tried to convince herself that it was because it had been a long time since they saw each other in that chaos, but now that she found him she is willing not to let him go ever again.